We are the Ministry of the Real Truth, and we strive to bring you the real truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And today we are looking at America's own book, the Declaration of Independence. And it reads, the Americans' own book containing the Declaration of Independence, with the lives of the signers, the Constitution of the United States, the inaugural addresses and first annual messages of all the presidents, and all pictured here, from Washington to Pierce, the farewell addresses of George Washington and Andrew Jackson, with a portrait and life of the early presidents of the United States to the present time. New York, Leavitt and Allen, number 379 Broadway, 1957. For the people to know their rights, to know whether this Declaration of Independence was the real deal, 100% the real deal, and this is what they're getting from this proclamation, or it's totally bogus and it's not bringing them what it declares. This was entered according to Act of Congress in the year 1853 by Leavitt and Allen in the Clerk's Office of the District Court of Massachusetts, USA. Stereotyped by Geo A. Curtis, North England Type and Stereotype Foundry, Boston. And here's your contents page. Declaration of Independence and the lives of the signers, constitutions of the United States, etc. Sketches of the lives of the presidents from Washington to Pierce. The Americans' own book, Declaration of Independence. When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with one another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. So what does this mean? Okay, over the course of human life within a particular country, i.e. United States of America, it becomes necessary, it's important for one people, united people, the entire country, were united, supposedly united, to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, to break them down, right? And then create them again, recreate them. And to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of God, nature's God entitle them. So they have this right to certain laws of nature and nature's God, or God, the Creator, that they're entitled to. Okay? So they should have the basics, be able to possess land, buy land, create crops, harvest, trade, have businesses of their own, etc., etc. That's their basic rights in order to live on, to survive. They need those basics. So anything that causes them to be divided, separated, or non-united, they should be able to have that power to dissolve and resolve. Right? They should be entitled to their right to say, hey, this isn't right, we need to fix it. And it continues, we, these are the presidents, those who signed the Declaration of Independence, etc., hold these truths to be self-evident. They'll prove themselves, right? Self-proving. That all men, it doesn't mention here all men, women and children, it just specifically says men, which could indicate sexism. Okay? But it could also be referring to all men and women and children, okay, of the United States of America. Are or have been created equal, that they are endowed, especially gifted by the Creator, with certain unalienable rights, natural rights, God-given rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's the basics, okay? That to secure these rights, governments are instituted or formed among men, right? They become institutions, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, those that they're ruling over. In that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundations on such principles, and organising its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. So, these people who are ruled by these authorities, if they see something fishy going on, tyrants, etc., like that, they have the alienable rights to shut it down, dissolve it, resolve it, for their safety and happiness, right? So they should not be impeded. Someone else should not be standing in their way saying, no, none of that. Okay. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments, long established, should not be changed for light and transient causes, for their own causes, right? They shouldn't be creating it for their gain alone. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable. So if you have an evil dictator or tyrant ruling and evils abounding, well, they will suffer because of it. That isn't right. All experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. So again, if you have a tyrant or a dictator ruling and all he's putting out there is evils abounding, and those people are suffering, they should have the right to abolish that form of tyranny or evil and restore that which they are accustomed to. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government. So in present America, all this oppression, suppression, dumbing down of their rights to free speech, expression, etc. In the case of Peterson, him being persecuted, giving crap because he makes a political statements on Joe Rogan, etc. He has his truths. He believes that as a psychiatrist, he should be telling his people, his patients, the truth, not telling them lies, as the University of Canada wants to do when they train their new students who are keen to be psychiatrists, like he is, that they have to tell lies to their patients or their clients. So this kind of thing, as he states, should be stopped. Okay? It's not fair, it's not right, it's not just, it's not honest. When a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces are designed to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. So this, by the people, for the people, should be 100% true, honest. By the people, for some of the people, well, not many of the people, or hardly any of the people. That is total crap. Such has been the patient sufferance of the colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former system of government. The colonies suffered under British rule. The history of the present king, when it was written, okay, but prior to when it was written, the Declaration of Independence, and this is probably why it was written. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations. It was all for the glory of Great Britain. As a South African or somebody else said to us once, watch out for them because they'll come in, they'll take all your resources, they'll suck your country dry, leave you with nearly nothing, cause trouble, fights, infighting, etc., and then leave, and then they'll send someone else in to break it up, like they do with their military. Okay, because they're the muscle, they're the power to do that sort of thing. Okay, so the history of the present King of Great Britain, or that time, is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having a direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. They were tyrants, so that's why the people rose up, had a revolution, and kicked them out. But they're still under English rule. They still pay their taxes to England, the Queen of England, who's passed, possibly to the King of England, and the banks. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. So this president has refused to apply those laws, those most wholesome and necessary for the public good, the betterment of the peoples. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operations till his assent shall be obtained. So if he's a president who says, well, we're not going to pass that law because when it needs to be passed, he's doing the people wrong, right? And he's utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the repository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures, what he dictates. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with many firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. Anyone that stands up against them, they get flack for it, because they're opposing with great strength his invasions, his downtrodden on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time after such dissolutions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for the exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He, by the looks of this, is trying to prevent others from coming in and taking over office. Maybe they're a party that says to the people, we're going to do this, we have to do this, we have to do that. So perhaps they try to get rid of them by making false accusations, giving them so much pressure that they go mad, or trying to put them behind bars. He has endeavoured to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws of naturalisation of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migration thither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. Okay, it looks like he's gone long and hard to prevent the populace of the states, the American states, so maybe that's something like reducing the privileges of foreigners. You know, immigrants come in and they get immigration status, they come before the people they get all the things that the people are trying to fight for and they never get it, right? That it's like they're getting gifts and everything, you know. It's like here in New Zealand, you got immigration status, etc. You have to wait for 10 or so years before you get seen through a clinic, while these people, because they got migration rights or immigration status, they're in there straight away. They're there before you. Okay. They get housing before you. They get this before you. Because they say, oh, we've got no money, or this sort of stuff. But then suddenly they got all this money. They can build these giant houses, you know, on old properties, put up big fences, cameras and all that sort of stuff, and then move in 10 or 20 in-laws or family members, right, from their country. Okay, this is just what we've observed over the years. Okay, they have more rights than you, the people, the indigenous or the native or the people, you know, that came into the country years ago. They have more rights than you do because of these legislations made. Okay, that they have immigration status, etc., etc. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their officers and the amount of payment of their salaries. So that could be in the case of Jordan Peterson, where the universities are saying he's politically outspoken, he's made some comments, we're going to revoke his psychiatry license, etc., etc., because he's not conforming. He has to go and have retraining to put him back right on track to their way of thinking, and then they'll restore his license so he can practice psychiatry. It's all their way, not his way anymore. It's all their way. And if he doesn't conform, he's going to lose that license. They're going to revoke his license. So here it's saying anyone in the courts who's been paid off or trained, etc., to do his will, what he wants, solely what he wants, and not listen to anybody else or what the legislation says, then this person needs to be stopped, because he's made judgments dependent on his will alone, okay, for their particular officers, and the amount of payment of their salaries. So it could possibly be, well, you're doing what we want, so we'll pay you a higher wage, okay, for doing so, for pushing it. Yeah, give you some bonuses. Here you go, here's some extra money on the side for doing our will, for pushing our legislation, etc., etc., and keeping out that of others. That could be the case. He has erected a multitude of new officers and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and to eat out their substance. In other words, he's inserted people amongst those who were following correct judiciary laws, right? All these laws, these legislations. He sent them in there to cause problems, to break it down and to replace it with his dictates. Okay? If you don't conform, it's going to happen to you. Threats of death, threats of loss, etc., etc. That could be the case. He has kept among us, in time of peace, standing armies without the consent of our legislators. So he has these military-like, or these armies that no one has knowledge of, basically. That no one said, yeah, okay, that's needed. And he's affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. A force of their own. He's rendered that military, that section of the military, a force of its own. So they go out there and do his will. If he says go out there and beat the crap out of everybody, then they'll go and do it. This independent militia. He is combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our constitution. So offshore laws, some laws in, say, the East, say Saudi Arabia, Islamic laws, Noahic laws, etc., etc. Not those laid down by the supposed founding fathers, etc. These are foreign laws being introduced. Giving his assent, or giving his power to the acts of pretending legislation. He's saying, well, and he's backing them up. Their false legislation. For quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states. So it's like these cops that go out there and they kill these people on the street, etc., and they get away with it. Okay, well, this guy's a known criminal, crackhead, whatever. So yeah, and he was asking for it, all this sort of crap, right? So these cops or whatever, yeah, okay, they're all cool. Those sanctions to stop that sort of thing, it was his fault. The end. Okay. And these guys aren't doing time or anything for that. Maybe they get through the press. They say, oh, they've been told off, punished, they're on leave, and that's it. They're back on the force, awkward beat, so long after, and then they do the same thing. Or others in other states are doing the same thing and getting away with it. For cutting off our trade with all parts of the world. So if somebody creates, because someone else has created Brexit or something like that, or something similar to that, and says, right, if you don't do this, you don't do that, I'm going to cut you off, I'm going to boycott you, all this sort of stuff, because you're not consenting to what we demand, what we dictate. And then imposing high taxes on the people without their consent. Okay, you just go, bam, here's the high taxes, you got to pay this. Hey, we didn't know anything about that. We never knew about that. We never heard about that. It wasn't made legislation. You've just put it on us, right? Because you're being greedy or whatever. For depriving us, in many cases, of the benefit of trial by jury. So it's like, okay, these cops go to a crime in like a child, whatever, 14-year-old child, and say he did it because they have racial prejudice, bias, etc. And so forth. There's a 14-year-old who was executed on false claims that he did something to these two younger girls that he befriended, and they just executed him, right? because the person on the jury was actually some relation of those two girls that were supposedly murdered. Right? He tampered with the jury and put all the blame on this young 14-year-old African American boy. And then so many years later, oh, it shouldn't have happened, all this sort of stuff. Too late, it happened. It's like the Nuremberg trials, okay? All these Nazis were to be tried in a Jewish court, legislation, and they would have had an unfair trial, they would have been put to death, etc. like that. But the Americans stepped in and says, no, you have to do it through a justice system. You have to have a court of law, etc., so they get a fair trial. You can't just like take them away and behind closed doors decide, do a judgment, decide a judgment and a resolution, okay? Because of your prejudice, your bias, because they had killed millions of your people. No. Justice for all, matey. Trial by jury. Trial by peers, right? For transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offences. So, someone makes an accusation in another country and you ship them off to there, right? I.e., it's like Joan of Arc defeating the English. She was French, she defeated the English in battle. The English didn't like that, so they said to the Roman Catholics, hand her over. We're going to trial her as a witch. She's a witch. How could she have beaten us? A woman. She must have used magical satanic powers. So hand her over. So the Roman Catholics did, and they burnt her at the stake. And silliness, the silly religion, years later, ordained her as a saint. For abolishing the free system of English laws in the neighbouring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instruments for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies. Okay, you've got the old English, the British were there, right, harassing the colonies, all that sort of stuff, but they may have provided English law, okay, in neighbouring provinces, thereby establishing a government structure, enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into other colonies, right? Even though those British were just, cruel, etc., as history, American history reveals, they did put some pretty good laws in there in those states, right? In those different states, right? So if someone goes in there and gets rid of them, so anyone can step in there and just step and take your possessions, accuse you of this, accuse you of that, run you out of town, okay, with these, according to these new fake laws, overriding those set laws, well, they should be stopped. For taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our government. Okay. For suspending our own legislators and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of its protection and waging war against us. Okay, so he said to the people, well, we can't help you there. You're not under our protection for different reasons, so we're going to fight you. Right? We declare war against you. Yeah, whatever excuse he comes up with, he declares war against them. And he plunders their seas, ravaged their coasts, burnt their towns and destroyed the lives of the people in response to that, right? He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation and tyranny already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most bizarre, barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. So if this president does all this, well, he's not worthy to be the president anymore. If he's sending military out to different states to destroy them and take all they have because he's a tyrant, then he's not fit to be head of office and to rule that civilized nation. That's what it looks like. He has constrained our fellow citizens, our fellow Americans, taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against the country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, and to fall themselves by their hands. So they recruited a lot of turncoats to inform them, their informants, the Judases that hand their own friends over, their family, etc., for monetary gain. Okay, so it looks like Americans have been taken captive on the high seas in battles, etc. He's suggesting that they bear arms against America and become the executioners of the friends and brethren, or for themselves by their hands. So they should come and fight. They're members of this other army, foreign army. They should come in and attack their own people, and even if it costs them their lives. He has excited domestic insurrections among us and has endeavoured to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes and conditions. Okay, so it says here who this is has enticed or created domestic insurrections, or rebellions against them, right? Endeavouring to bring on the inhabitants of their frontiers, or on their borders, Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes and conditions. So just wipe out everything in their way, as they're instructed. At every stage of these oppressions we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of the free people. So yeah, there's no way he can be the president of the United States if he's a tyrant, if he's a cruel leader, etc., etc. He should be kicked out of office. He's unfit to be the ruler of those free people, free Americans, right? And that's why they had a revolution, because they wanted to be free from British yoke, because they were cruel buggers, etc., etc., and they were forcing them to pay money, give property, etc., in the name of the Queen of England. Nor have we been wanting in attention to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of the attempts by their legislator to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. Okay, so what this is basically saying, if we had it incorrect, we are apologetic there. They're probably talking to and about the British who ruled over them before they had that revolution and fought against them. The people rose up and fought against them and kicked them out, right? They abolished British rule. They became free people through people like George Washington, etc., etc., and the revolution. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. So these Brits heard it all and they didn't want to know about it, so nah, never mind, get stuffed. Okay, we rule, our rules, yours no longer apply. If you don't like it, too bad. We must therefore acquiesce and the necessity which denounces our separation to hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. Okay, so if they're against you, against them, with their enemies, okay, they are the enemies if they go to battle, they are the enemies in war, but they are friends in times of peace, because everybody's, the issue's been resolved. So, no more fighting, okay, live as friends, not foes. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies. So is that this representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled in a form of General Congress. So they all congregated, they all got together and appealed to the Supreme Judge of the world. Who was that? God. For the rectitude of our intentions to do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these United Colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown. There you go, it's all about the British, right? And the British came in and ruled them. That's what it's talking about. And that's why they had this declaration. And that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. No more. They cut them off totally. And that as a free and independent state, or bunch of states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, and so forth. Once they are free, once they're liberated and they're independent, non-dependent on the British Crown, they had full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of our divine providence, what God has given us, what God had given him, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honour. So, it's for all Americans. All of this was for all Americans. All those who resided in America. Not just one lot. With a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, what's been given by God. The nature's laws, natural laws of God, etc., etc. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honour. The foregoing declaration was by order of Congress engrossed and signed by the following members. John Hancock, and that was the name for your signature, right? It's a term. Sign below, sign your John Hancock. Okay, so obviously this person, John Hancock, was probably one who signed it. Okay, from New Hampshire, Josiah Bartlett, William Whipple, Matthew Thornton, Massachusetts Bay, Rhode Island, Connecticut, they all signed it. Okay, all these different states, they all signed and they agreed to it. The Declaration of Independence for a liberated America, United States. Okay, united people, one people, all Americans. And here's lives of the signers. Samuel Adams. The memories of few men will perhaps be cherished by the posterity with a more generous and grateful administration than those of the patriotic individuals who first signed the political independence of our country, the USA. They hazarded by the deed not only their lands and possessions, but their personal freedom and their lives. And when it is considered that most of them were in the vigour of existence, gifted with considerable fortunes, and with all the offices and emoluments and at the disposal of royalty within their reach, the sacrifice which they risked appears magnified, and their disinterested patriotism more worthy of remembrance. Although many of them can rest their sole claim to lasting distinction upon the one great act with which they were adventitiously connected, still their lives present a valuable transcript of the times in which they lived, and afford examples of inflexible honesty, heroic decision, and noble energy of mind, quite as interesting as any records of the eccentricities of genius or the grasping efforts of ambition. Not one of the least ardent and uncompromising assertors of the rights and liberties of his country, was the subject of our present sketch, Samuel Adams. This gentleman descended from a respectable family which immigrated to America with the first settlers of the land. Was born at Quincy in Massachusetts, September 22nd, 1722. In 1736 he became a member of Harvard College and took his degree of Master in 1743. On this latter occasion he proposed the following question, in which he maintained the affirmative, or the positive: whether it be lawful to resist the Supreme Magistrate if the Commonwealth cannot be otherwise preserved. On quitting the university he commenced the study of the law. But soon afterwards, at the request of his mother, became a clerk in the counting house of Thomas Cushing, at that time an eminent merchant. The genius of Adams was not suited to commercial pursuits. His devotion to politics and his interest in the welfare of his country diverted his attention from his own business concerns, and he retired from his mercantile connections, poorer by far than when he entered into them. In 1763, when a committee was appointed by the people of Boston to remonstrate against the taxation of the colonies by the British ministry, because they're probably taxing them too high, the instructions of that committee were drawn by Mr. Adams and gave a powerful proof of his ability and zeal. He soon became an influential leader in the popular assemblies and was bold in denouncing the oppressive acts of the mother country, or the British, right? In 1765 he was chosen a representative to the General Court of the State from the town of Boston. Here he soon made himself conspicuous and became clerk of the legislative body. About this time he was the author of several spirited essays and plans of resistance to the exactions of the British ministry. He suggested the first Congress at New York, which was a step to the establishment of the Continental Congress 10 years after. In 1770, 2 regiments of troops were quartered in the town of Boston, apparently to superintend the conduct of the inhabitants. This measure roused the public indignation to the utmost and soon gave occasion to a quarrel between a party of soldiers and citizens, in which 11 of the latter were killed or wounded by a guard under the command of Captain Preston. This rencontre, which is well known under the name of the Boston Massacre and will long remain memorable as the first instance of bloodshed between the British and Americans, did not tend to allay the excitement caused by the presence of the troops. On the following morning a meeting of the citizens was called, and Samuel Adams first rose to address the assembly. His style of eloquence was bold and impressive, and few could exercise a more absolute control over the passions of a multitude. A committee, of which he was one, was chosen to wait until Governor Hutchinson, with a request that the troops might be instantly removed. The governor replied that the troops were not under his command, but Adams, with his usual intrepidity, would brook no prevarication or excuse, and declared that if he permitted them to remain, it would be at his peril. Well, if arguments broke out and then they got hurt, they got killed, well, that was their fault. So he did suggest to them, well, you know, they might get hurt, the people might get hurt because they might fire on them, all this stuff. We don't need that. Please remove them. The governor, alarmed at the personal danger which threatened him, finally consented to the demand, and further hostilities were for a time suspended. The injudicious management of his private affairs rendered Mr. Adams poor, so he made no money out of it. When this was known in England, it was proposed to bribe him, or pay him off, by the gift of some lucrative office. A suggestion of that kind being made to Governor Hutchinson, he replied that such was the obstinacy and inflexible disposition of the man that he could never be conciliated by any office or gift, whatever. So he wasn't going to get bribed, wasn't going to get paid off. He didn't take bribes or gifts like that, right? He was a true man. A very honourable man. A higher compliment could not have been paid him. The offer, however, was made, it is said, and rejected. About the year 1773, Governor Gage renewed the experiment. Colonel Fenton waited upon Mr. Adams with the assurance of Governor Gage that any benefit he might ask would be conferred on him, on condition that he would forsake the popular faction. Turns back on the people, right? All those that were behind him. While at the same time, significant threats were thrown out of the consequences which might ensue if he persisted in his opposition to the measures of the British ministry. Yeah. So they were saying to him, look, buddy, if you don't drop it, there'll be trouble, right? Probably death threats, all that sort of stuff. The reply of the undaunted patriot was characteristic. Go, tell Governor Gage, said he, that my peace has long since been made with the King of Kings, it's probably with Christ, right? And that is the advice of Samuel Adams to him, no longer to insult the feelings of an already exasperated people. They've had enough of it. They're going to take any more. Enough's enough. They've been under enough pressure as it is. Under the irritation produced by this answer, Governor Gage issued a proclamation which comprehended the following language: I do hereby in His Majesty's name offer and promise His most gracious pardon to all persons who shall forthwith lay down their arms. Okay. So if these people were armed, ready to take action, he is giving them a bribe, saying if you lay down your arms and return to the duties of peaceable subjects, accepting only from the benefits of such a pardon, Samuel Adams and John Hancock, whose offences are of too flagitious a nature to admit of any consideration but that of condign punishment. So everyone else gets pardoned but these two who incited their rebellion, their arming themselves. So they had no excuse, they had no way out. They had to be punished. Mr. Adams was a member of the First Continental Congress, which assembled in Philadelphia in 1774, and he remained an active member of that body until the year 1781. During this period, he was one of the warmest advocates for the Declaration of American Independence. After that declaration had been irrevocably adopted, and when the subsequent gloom which overspread the land had depressed the spirits of the most ardent advocates of liberty, or freedom, the firmness and enthusiasm of Mr. Adams was unchanged. His example contributed in a high degree to inspire his countrymen with confidence of their final success. The following encomium upon him is from a work upon the American Rebellion by Mr. Galloway, published in England in 1780. He eats little, drinks little, sleeps little, thinks much, and is most indefatigable in the pursuit of his object. It was this man who, by his superior application, managed at once the factions in Congress at Philadelphia and the factions of New England. In 1781, Mr. Adams retired from Congress, but having already been a member of the convention which formed the constitution of his native state, he was placed in the Senate and for several years presided over that body. In 1789 he was elected Lieutenant Governor, in which office he continued till 1794, when upon the death of Hancock he was chosen Governor and was annually re-elected till 1797, when he retired from public life. He died October 2nd, 1803, at the advanced age of 82. In his person, Mr. Adams was only of the middle-sized, but his countenance indicated great decisions of purpose. He wasn't very tall, wasn't very big. His countenance indicated great decision of purpose and an energetic mind. He was a sincere and practical Christian, and the last production of his pen was in favour of Christian truth. So those who say, none of those forefathers, none of those people were Christians, they're baloney. It's just stated it here from these ancient, or these old writings, right? His writings were voluminous, it was quite a lot, very large, but as they chiefly related to the temporary politics of the day, few of them remain. So there's not many of them around, right? He always manifested a singular indifference to pecuniary considerations. He was poor while he lived, and it has been said that had not the death of an only son relieved the poverty of his latter days, Samuel Adams would have had to claim a burial from private charity or at the public expense. Right, they would have had to raise money. Upon his deathbed, he would have had to raise money for him to have a place to be buried. So there was one great American there. Josiah Bartlett. The patriotism of this eminent man was of a pure and highly disinterested nature. He rose to distinction unaided by family influence or party connections, and maintained through life a reputation for strict integrity, great penetration of mind, and considerable abilities. Mr. Braxton was a gentleman of, this is Carter Braxton, Mr. Brixton was a gentleman of a polished mind, of considerable conversational powers and respectable talents. His latter days were unfortunately coloured by pecuniary embarrassments caused by the miscarriage of his commercial speculations and by several vexatious lawsuits. Of his numerous family, but one daughter is believed survives in that era, right? Okay, so he was plagued with problems. Charles Carroll, he repealed the Stamp Act. And some story of what he did. His serenity, and in no small degree perhaps his longevity, may be owing to the permanency of his principles. In early life he founded his political creed on the rights of man, and reposing his faith in the religion of his fathers, possibly God, Jesus Christ, he had felt none of those vacillations and changes so common in times of political or religious agitations. It were good for the nation that he should long continue among them, for in his presence all party feuds were hushed, in arguments that rose, he somehow quietened them down, right? And the demagogue, accustomed to vociferate elsewhere, in his vanity to be heard, talks not above his breath when the aged patriot is near. In a republic where titles are not known, we ought to make a peerage of talents, virtues, patriotism, and age, that every youth may learn to admire, respect, and imitate the wise and good. With all our wishes for his stay here on earth, the patriarch must soon be gathered to his fathers, and his name given to the historian and poet. The bard shall then strike his harp and sing in strain, not light nor melancholy, but with admiration, touched with religious hope about this particular man. The name of Carroll is the only one on the declaration to which the residence of the signer is appended. Okay, so is that like they're not telling you where he lives? The reason why it was done in this case is understood to be as follows. The patriots who signed that document did it almost literally with ropes about their necks, it being generally supposed that they would, if unsuccessful, be hung as rebels. That's a figure of speech, right? When Carroll, they didn't actually have ropes around their neck while they were signing the declaration. When Carroll had signed his name, someone at his elbow remarked, "You'll get clear. There are several of that name. They will not know which to take." "Not so," he replied. He, and immediately added, "of Carrollton." So he put his address, his state where he lived, right. In 1827, the editor of the Philadelphia National Gazette published a biography of Mr. Carroll, which appeared in the American Quarterly Review. He records the following fact. In 1825, one of Mr. Carroll's granddaughters was married to the Marquis of Wellesley, then Viceroy of Ireland, and in a singular circumstance that 140 years after the first immigration of her ancestors to America, this lady should become Vice Queen of the country from which they fled, at the summit of a system which a more immediate ancestor had risked everything to destroy, or in the energetic and poetical language of Bishop England, that in this land from which their father's father fled in fear, his daughter's daughter now reigns as queen, and so forth. His whole career, says Mr. Walsh, public and private, suited the dignity of his distinctive appellation, the surviving signer. He was always a model of regularity in conduct and sedateness in judgment, a natural sagacity and refinement of taste and pleasure, and unaffected habitual courtesy and vigilant observation, etc., etc. He was highly cultivated. He fully improved the advantages of an excellent classical education and extensive foreign travel. He read much of ancient and modern literature and gave the keenest attention to contemporary events and characters. His patriotism never lost its earnestness and elevation. Lots of people here, it says that in the younger days, in his house, they just couldn't get away, right? Not because he was forcing them to stay there. It's just the way he presented himself, his presence. They never left this mansion without additional impressions of peculiar respect for the singular felicity of temperament and perfection of self-discipline, from which it resulted that no one, neither the kindred, his family, or his relations, domestic, nor guest, neighbours, etc., could feel his presence and society as in the least oppressive or irksome, exact and systematic, opulent and honoured, enlightened and heedful though he was. The announcement of the death of Charles Carroll was made as follows in one of the Baltimore papers, etc. He saw the people for whom he had toiled and pledged his life, his fortune and his sacred honour, united, prosperous and happy, and lived to see a worthy fellow citizen elected a second time to the chief magistracy of the nation by an almost unanimous voice, embracing a large portion of every section of the Union, thus evincing that there was no reason to apprehend any danger of a severance of this happy Union, etc., etc. He goes on about Samuel Chase, and it continues to the lives of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. Benjamin Franklin, John Hancock, let's go back. Something here. On the meeting of Congress, Mr. Hughes was nominated one of the committee appointed to state the rights of the colonies in general, to several instances in which those rights had been violated or infringed by the British, obviously, and the means most proper to be pursued for obtaining a restoration of them. He also assisted in preparing this celebrated report, which was drawn up as follows. 1. That they are entitled to life, liberty and property, and they have never ceded to any sovereign power whatever a right to dispose of either without their consent. So they never said to the British, for example, well, yeah, you can take it all away. Yeah, go for it. Okay. They never did that without having them consult them first, right? And say, yeah, okay, we give you permission. 2. That our ancestors who first settled these colonies were at the time of their immigration from the mother country, or from another country, entitled to all the rights, liberties and immunities of free and natural born subjects within the realm of England. So those pilgrims that came from there, went to America, they had all these natural rights, etc. Free and natural born subjects, they had the rights within the realm of England, so what's to stop them from having those same ones in their new land? Amongst their colonies. 3. That by such immigration they had by no means forfeited, given up, or surrendered, or lost any of those rights, but that they were, and their descendants now are, entitled at that time to the exercise and enjoyment of all such of them as their local and other circumstances enable them to exercise and enjoy. 4. And it goes on and on and on. Okay, it's probably about 11 or 12 of them, or more. Okay. Okay, so we hope that you enjoyed this video on your American Declaration of Independence and the lives of the signers. This is America's own book, Declaration of Independence, which we have reviewed. We hope that it gives you insight into what it was all really about and what it should be about today. That it should still stand to all those Americans, all people of America, not just a certain group, but all who are standing on American soil. Okay, if you take the oath, American citizenship, etc., etc., then it should be honourable. Okay, all those people should be, if they've been declared American citizens of the United States, they should be treated as such. Not one lot of people be treated as the people, while others are persecuted, continually oppressed, and so forth. So if you like this particular video, give us a like, a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and set that notification bell so you won't miss out on any of our other videos. And then go share this particular video with all your family, friends and others, so they know they fully understand what their own book, the Declaration of Independence, was really about, and the information on those who actually signed it, okay, for the people. Okay, they wanted to help the people, they wanted them to be liberated, to have inalienable rights, God-gifted rights, natural rights, to have land, to sow a harvest, reap a harvest, and so forth.